Good evening. Good evening, friends. All right. So, I welcome you all back, getting together, gather around the fire. Whatever that fire is for you, you know what it is. Wherever you're getting that warmth from, it could be the TV screen with me on it. Doesn't matter. Thank you for being here tonight. If you're watching live, then it is about 6:56 p.m. on the East Coast. Add or subtract wherever the hell you are, whatever time zone, and there you have it. Everybody else who's listening in the hereafter, then hello to you on whatever day and whatever date and whatever year. And I'm really appreciative for the time we're going to have tonight. And we have a great guest coming on. It's just one guest. One guest. I was going to have V, Gorilla, and Veles, both from Rogue News, be on together tonight. It was going to be like a round table kind of a thing. I was really excited. It's been a long time since Veles has been on, and we never had V on, although I've been on his show twice, so we're going to have to figure this one out. Anyway, Veles is here tonight. V, unfortunately, had to skip out for some personal things going on, but everything is well. No worries, and we'll iron that all out. But it's a Wednesday evening. It's a hump day. May you all get humped. Or do some humping. And the date is November 8th, 2023. And greetings to you all, whether you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, DLive, Rockfin, beyond, but pilled.net, which is also in embedded very cozy way on quitefrankly.tv. Hello to you. That is, quite frankly, hub for not only the show, but everything after and in between, the Quite Frankly network. So thank you, everybody at pilled.net, quitefrankly.tv. That's been a wonderful marriage I can't wait to build on in the future. So, which is, I should say, once again, starts next on Monday. On Monday night at the intermission is when everybody's going to be given a chance to jump over to I will put the Pilled link into all of the episode descriptions, so wherever you are at the moment, you'll be able to bounce over by hitting that. We'll put a QR code up on screen so you can go to wherever as well, and you can always fall back on quitefrankly.tv. So that's what it is. And what I've been loving is that I've gotten a lot of the older members of our audience getting in touch with me because, I understand that, doing things a little bit different could be nerve-wracking, especially if it takes you a while to learn one platform over the other. And I am so happy with the people who've gotten in touch with me and said, Frank, I was so nervous, but between your station on pill.net and with just being able to navigate quitefrankly.tv and watch things there and cast to my television, it is so much easier than I thought it was going to be. I'm very happy with that because it's a good thing. We're doubling down on the future, and we are tethering to each other so we don't lose track when the undertow comes tugging along. All right. That's what we have tonight. Veles. And depending on how certain friends of ours feel in the second half, who knows? We might even get a special guest. But I have more than enough to carry us through. Let's get into the super chat so far. I would also like to just say thank you to Blue Monster Prep and all of our friends on the affiliates page. Go and buy some stuff for Christmas. But I should say that we're going to have two new big additions on quitefrankly.tv, the affiliates page. A brand new coffee by the Coffee Revolution in Iowa. They're all going to be linked up over there on the affiliates page soon. We've got the page set up. We've got the coffee picked out, the marketing. Everything's ready to go. We're just going to update, and that'll be on its way. So you'll be able to get yourself, start stuffing stockings. And then also, we're going to have brand new, rebooted merch, which is going to be done by our friends at Rise Attire. Getting away from Teespring, the quality in the shirts are going to be incredible. We're going to take very, very special care of the designs, and I can't wait. I can't wait to start building on that, and it's going to be a lot of good stuff happening, and it's all happening at once. The new deal that we're doing for doubling down on our independence on quitefrankly.tv and Pilled, and then everything else, and I'm feeling pretty good. Nina Simone would be happy. For me. All right, well, that's what we have. Thank you, everybody. Go to quitefrankly.tv and enjoy everything on the affiliates page. For tonight, in the grab bag, we're going to star on Mediaite. So you know it's going to be crazy. All right, let's get this up on the screen. Forgot to bring it up there. Duly elected. You know who was duly elected, kids? Hitler. Hitler was duly elected. Hillary Clinton was invited onto the View, and she answered a question, very well thought out question by what's her name, the Sunny Hostin, about what do we do about a second Trump term if we get one of those. Well, to save you all from listening to her voice, I'm going to read you the transcript. What would happen if he's to be reelected? Hillary Clinton goes, oh, I can't even think, because I think it would be the end of our country as we know it. I don't say that lightly. Our country, as if she shares it with anybody. You know, I hated losing, she said. And I especially hated losing to him because I had seen so many warning signals. Yeah, like his ability to write checks to you during the campaign. But I immediately said, look, we have to give him a chance. We've got to support, the president that we have. And I meant it. And I tried really, really hard. This is a woman who at the time had already paid millions of dollars to effectively commandeer portions of the media and British intelligence to be able to go and commandeer the FBI and sick all of her supporters sitting inside the FBI on Trump. And they immediately afterwards, after the election was ended and she lost, they immediately went to work on dismantling Trump's cabinet. I don't even know if Mike Flynn made it to Valentine's Day 2017. And this is the bullshit she's running. We had to give him a chance. I really tried. She's Satan. I think that he'd be even worse now because he was somewhat restrained back then, believe it or not. And in fact, the first term by people who he hired because he thought that they would go along with him, and they stood up to him. Right. So she says, and so now he's going to, if he were ever near the Oval Office again, find people who have no principles, no conscience, who are totally tied to, his fortunes, literally, and therefore would do whatever he said. Ooh, that sounds delicious. Delicious. If I were Trump and I won a second term, despite everything that's being thrown at him right now, I would put a want ad up in the penny saver. Okay? And I would put a want ad up for cabinet members. That's what I would say. Cabinet wanted, hardened Americans with no scruples. You must be devoid of scruples. That's what I would do. Frank, who would you pick for your cabinet? I would go to the penny saver and put out a want ad. And I'd take any hardened American with a chip on their shoulder that just wants to put the screws to the people who screwed us. That's all. And then, of course, she goes, and what I meant by so the wreckage is almost unimaginable. When I was Secretary of State, I used to talk about one and done. What I meant by that is that people would get legitimately elected, and then they would try to do away with the elections and do away with the opposition and do away with the free press. You mean like all your friends in Ukraine? You mean like what's going on right now? And she says, and you could see it in countries where, well, Hitler was duly elected. Wow. That's deep. Hitler was duly elected, right? And I also remember when Hitler was sabotaged by an completely unaccountable bureaucracy of crooked cops and judges, and 96% of the German media was against him. And I remember when Hitler was then investigated nonstop, impeached twice. The second time that he was impeached came after he was run out of Germany. after he was run out of Germany, and an 80-year-old child molester was inaugurated instead. I remember that was the most harrowing part of the Hitler story. That was harrowing. So but you have to understand what she's doing here. To the women who watch The View, this is their history lesson for the day. Okay, so when they go and they're online at the AMP, they've bought their Laughing Cow cheese and their Activia yogurt to regulate their gut biome. When they're online at the AMP and they're chatting it up with some other local yenta, they can find a way to slip in there. Well, we got to be careful. Hitler was duly elected. And then the other yenta will go, that's what I said. Okay? And then, of course, the son will say, Mom, who's Hitler? Oh, he invented anti-Semitism. We'll talk about him one day when you're ready. Then that's it. For some people, this is their history lesson for the day. So that's why this rotting hag would go there. But she did. And of course, here's another example of what happened to Hitler after he was run out of Germany by an 80-year-old child molester who anyway, here's what they also did to Hitler. This is from Becker News from today. Judge approves prosecutor's motion that would force Donald Trump to give up attorney-client privilege. Do you understand how insane this is? My question is, which of Trump's civil rights are still intact? Between the gag orders and the no juries and now they're trying to take away attorney-client privilege. I mean, and they would do far. Again, it always comes down to this. Donald Trump's political viability is now. That's it. After 2024, that's it. So this is really not about, are you on the Trump train or not? So much of this is about applying it to your life, to your children, and to your unborn grandchildren and great-grandchildren. What kind of a world are they going to live in? Because far worse would be done to them with no press coverage that it's going to be there to talk about the carnage of what's being done to their lives based on some kind of opinion they have or a donation they made or anything, a joke they made. We see what the targeting inside the media, especially with CISA and everything else that was just exposed and expanded on. We had all the Twitter files and stuff like that, but also what Jim Jordan just released this week was a little bit more backup for that, a little bit more of an expanded view. We're all going to be coming under fire at one point or another if this keeps up. Anyway, there's that. And then we have this to end, because I want to do a couple of seconds of election talk before we bring on Veles tonight. Here's a headline from the New York Post, which should be very heartwarming. Helicopters are making crocodiles horny. And here's why. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one. The project star, Sarah Harris, took a moment to apologize to Channel 10 bosses during Tuesday night's episode of The Panel Show. Harris was speaking about Crocs with co-stars Waleed Ali, Tom Cashman, and Kate Langbrook when she made an X-rated confession. The panel were discussing news that Queensland male crocodiles are, quote, being driven into a mating frenzy by the sound and vibrations of Chinook choppers flying overhead when things took a lewd turn. The owner of a crocodile farm in the state recently revealed that their mating season has started especially early this year due to being sparked accidentally by the armed forces. Harris explains that's right, the helicopters are making the crocs horny. There's no easy way to say that. Experts aren't sure why, but they think the helicopter may have surrounded like a thunderstorm, which can often get the reptiles feeling randy. So there's some news for you that won't ruin your day. Maybe it'll give you hope in some way. I hope you feel hopeful right now. All right. Well, that's it. I'll be on the other side of the intro, and we'll set the table for our guest Veles from Rogue News as he arrives, and I can't wait to hear from you guys and gals tonight. In the meantime, please share the show far and wide. Wherever you're watching, just hit the share button. hit the share button and let's rock out. Also, I implore you all to leave some messages that we can read after intermission, when we are getting through to all of your thoughts and all of your shout outs and things like that. Quite frankly, superchat.com. That's quite frankly, superchat.com. You can take a picture right there. Take a snap of that QR code on the screen right there. You can leave that. Quite frankly, Super Chats. That's the universal Super Chats for everything. There's also the Gold Pills. There's the Rumble Rants. And there's tips on Rockfin. Even when we are jumping off at intermission, anything, any tips and Rumble Rants and all that stuff that are left in the beginning will be read in the second half anyway. So never hesitate to contribute to the show in any way, shape, or form. We love you all, and we will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Let's ride!
Hey, hey. All right, so I am so happy to kick this one off. Thank you, guys and gals, for following along and for being a part of the nightly experience here. You know, I was looking at, here's something as far as my hopes and my involvement in the election yesterday, I don't know how many of you out there had elections around you or in your state. I don't know if it was across the board, but we had some, state Supreme Court. But there's a couple of ballot measures. That was the real thing I wanted to just go and throw some heat at. One was about, I think, amending the state constitution to lift spending caps on schools. And I said no. Then another one about state constitutions with sewage and no. It'll still. I don't even see if it passed. Doesn't matter. Because we'd have more than enough money. All the money that's being taken from us, we'd have more than enough money to keep our schools in perfect condition if we weren't teaching, God knows how many foreign nationals and all their children. That's just what the thing is. That's just what it is constantly. So, other than that, I don't know. What would I have for yesterday? I had no real hopes. I don't really care in that respect. I'm more interested in what people like Marley Hornick are doing. Because in the current state that we're in right now, what can you really expect? So those are the efforts that I'm really interested in right now, because those are the only ones that dictate whether or not we have a fighting chance in the future. But then you wake up and I read this, and then I see all of the celebration on on Twitter from, the freakish creatures that are on the For You tab. I'm sure you see them as well. Here's the headline from the AP. Democrats won big on abortion rights Tuesday. Here's what the results say for the U.S. going forward. It is all abortion. Democrats had plenty of good news to celebrate in Tuesday's election. Abortion rights supporters won an Ohio ballot measure. Democrat governor of beat red Kentucky. I know. A Democratic governor of beat red Kentucky. That gives you people like Rand Paul and, well, then again, they waste their votes on Mitch McConnell. So, but how the hell did this happen? The elections, the re-election? I don't know. But that's just the way it is. And that's it. And it's re-elected reproductive rights, abortion all over the place. Pennsylvania Supreme Court, a Democrat won there after campaigning on his pledge to uphold abortion. Virginia, they took full control, the Democrats did, of the state house there because they want abortion. They need their abortion. Abortion. It's all it is. And I'm reading through this, and I'm saying to myself, you know, I mean, what I was realizing is that as I watched the celebrations as if it was VJ Day from these creatures, when I see George Takei to the Krasenstein test tube babies, this is a huge win. This is huge. It's all abortion. It's all abortion. And then it was really what it came down to was good old coffin legs there. Good old coffin legs, Letitia James, who is high off of her own clout these days. Completely unreasonable woman, living a reality TV dream right now with all the people she's fighting in court. We might as well have Flava Flav as an AG. That's exactly what we're talking about here. She goes and tweets. She adds her voice to the madness of the evening on the internet. My body, my choice, period. Wow. And that's when I really just reminded myself that there is no fixing this ever. We need at least 3 pro-human generations, totally uncorrupted by this kind of bloodlust, for there to really start being a change in things. Because it's one thing to champion Social Security, education initiatives, college education, all that stuff, healthcare, any other government subsidized scam that is promoted as some great thing, and of course has its own destruction baked into the concept, where you're always going against human intuition. You're always going against human ambition and human nature. This is what is always happening here. Even when we talk about the regulatory bodies that are created, that people think are great and they're always serving us well. The CDC, no. The FDA, the FTC, every regulatory agency that dictates everything from us, from how we run our businesses to how we collect rainwater. We are treated like babies and encouraged to surrender as much responsibility as possible. Okay? But when we talk about abortion, and we do from time to time, we are talking about the shedding of the deepest layers of responsibility that there are. The responsibilities to take care of life that you created. So last night when that poser Letitia James made her tweet and tried passing it off as some affirmation of freedom, I couldn't stop thinking to myself as I got into the shower and went about my night and all that stuff. We can't, as a people, actually conceptualize freedom, independence anymore, let alone ever live it. I don't know what the hell these people who are jumping up and down about one election or another think that they are celebrating. I mean, everything both parties, major parties champion, aims to fix outcomes, to kill real opportunities for people, and to absolve everybody of personal responsibility in one way or another. And that's just what it is right now. That's what it is. They love it. And they love that so many people live like zoo animals in this country. They love it. So, that just really took me over last night. It's just realizing that, I don't know. It's just nuts. The other thing you get is a lot of those GOP people who try to speed along the erasure of Donald Trump so that they can get back to normal levels of controlled demolition, because that's really what this is all about. Okay, they purposefully, the Republican Party, they purposefully place insufficient amounts of funds into underwhelming candidates, and then they say Trump is dragging the party down when Trump is beating his opponents by 50 plus points. What are you talking about? You're underfunding races. You're just torpedoing the entire thing, which is what you were doing in waves and ebbs and flows prior to Trump's arrival anyway. And this is just why people hate. I hate Republican Party so much more than the Democrat Party. You know, when a vicious band of hyenas are perfectly comfortable with who and what they are and will act with reckless abandon to get what they want, you can almost respect that, even though they're a vicious band of hyenas. But this is something else. And then there are people that are out there who are saying that it's not about Trump, it's just about abortion. Well, then whatever. Maybe it's for the best that we lose as quickly as possible and crash into the sea then, because if it really is about, if abortion is really the only motivating factor for people, then we have to find moderate ways of pumping the brakes on the murdering and the harvesting of baby parts and the industry that is propped up by it. Aside from the fact that we know it's not safe, legal, rare bullshit. We know it's not about rape and incest. If it's really about that, then over 99% of abortions would disappear overnight anyway. It's about contraception. And if that is really the only motivating factor for winning and losing elections, how well you tiptoe around the nature of abortion and what is actually happening right now, then we deserve the tribulation. We completely deserve it. What am I going to say anymore? Just, it just is what it is. Hey, well, you know what? I want to welcome back our good friend Veles. It's good to have him on. It's been months and months and months. How are you, sir? Do you hear me? Veles, you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello, man. How you been?
I'm good. How are you, my friend?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Just trying to sift through the garbage on a Wednesday night. You know how it is.
There's always garbage on a Wednesday night.
Oh, I know. There's always garbage on a Wednesday night. And you know what the thing with me, and I want to ask you about this just in general, because, you know, I don't really spend too much time looking at polls and numbers and studying what happened after elections. I have people that I can bring on to summarize that for me. But what I am looking at here right now is that there is a certain thing that has taken over our country that I don't understand. That if of something like abortion, we obsess so much about it right now, that if we can't wrap our heads around that and actually speak to it truthfully about what we're talking about, then how the hell would we ever really be able to solve any other problem of merit? Any other problem that is really just financial in nature? We're arguing over how to define life and when what's an appropriate cutoff for deliberately extinguishing it and dismembering it. And I mean, this is what we can't agree on something fundamental like that, something primal like that. What the hell are we going to do when we can't even get to dollars and cents?
Well, it's a very loaded topic. For all concerned. And that said, the other challenge, though, is as hard it is for folks to kind of go down this road, is stepping back a bit from the topic itself and looking at the bigger take on things, which is number one, that topic and a couple of the others that were out there, like marijuana legalization and similar. Anytime you're in a situation to draw in the voters emotionally on a topic, particularly by telling them that a perceived or a real right is being denied, they're going to react a certain way. I'm not saying that the average person is too ignorant to understand what's happening to them, but we're living in a highly sensitized and intensified environment, particularly after 2019. And on that particular topic of abortion, again, we're not all sides concerned are blind to the various parties that are involved in that, the people who benefit from it. Again, I'm trying to walk carefully on this topic from a higher level view, but I think it portends how they're going to package other issues as we get into the next election, both at the state and federal level.
Yeah, no, I get you. Especially with the way I saw some people talking about that in particular, that the wording of even these these referendums and these ballot measures that are there for people to vote on, the wording is manipulative in the way where people who aren't looking in too deeply are getting psychologically triggered into doing one thing or another and not really knowing how far down the rabbit hole this is all going to go. Like when we have our friend Rich on to talk about how polling is done, how carefully you have to choose words when you are surveying potential voters to be able to get the most accurate, unbiased tell of what's going on in the reasoning of, what the kind of reasoning that people employ when they are taking a look at things that are going on in the country and decisions that may have to be made at the ballot box and all that. So there has to be at least a little bit of that as a factor there too. The way that things are worded and how people look at things a little bit less deeply than others.
We definitely saw that in certain state initiatives a year or two ago. There were a couple that we covered on our Rogue program about, depending on the state, where the parties that brought the ballot, it almost becomes like a double negative. No for the issue means yes, yes for the issue means no. Other different ways that they've kind of obfuscated from the public what they're doing to you in how these things are worded. And it doesn't make things easier because a lot of this stuff, requires a lot of time to go dig into it. But I mean, if you had the time and the means to either file Freedom of Information Act requests or just go down to the local records office and dig up who is sponsoring any of these ballot issues, regardless of whether you're for or against, or if it's even a topic that you have no skin in that game. But to look at, is it the pharmaceutical industry? Is it some small but well-funded organization who's out there and has the right attorneys putting the right things on ballots and what have you? And it only adds to the challenges for the public in having to research these things before you even walk in to the ballot booth. I myself have found myself in a couple of situations just having to scroll through items, whether I'm using a physical ballot or electronic, to just skip certain things because it's like I have no clue what the crap that is, and I'm not getting into the. I probably should have done my research. I'm a bad voter. I should have looked into that more deeply before I got into the ballot booth. But and this kind of stuff, especially at the political science level, University of Michigan, some other places that are very keen on this stuff. This goes back to the 1970s about the narrative, especially if you're in Washington, D.C., walking those streets, and you'll hear the "and it is" laughter in certain bars and places where the neat and elite in Washington hang out about. You'll hear the media sometimes go down that road of, well, we need to have a national debate. Well, for God's sakes, I don't think this country's had a national debate since we signed the Articles of the Confederation. I mean, it's usually a lot of people who are very powerful and have wealth are putting things out there saying, hey, public, what do you think about that? And it takes both the voting for the topic itself, but as well as the follow-up of making sure that monies are spent properly or what have you. Case in point, the state of Illinois, I'm probably going to have my facts a little off, but it came out this morning. The state of Illinois is now investigating, I think, 111 people for basically stealing funds from the state. They're state employees, and they've been stealing funds from the state.
Oh.
I mean, the only way that ever gets investigated is not because of an over-eager prosecutor, but because somebody turned them in. One of the things we recently covered on one of our programs was the very powerful and very well-known defense contractor, Booz Allen Hamilton in Washington. For a number of years, they'd been overbilling the government. And I'll segue a little bit later as to why this matters. But I mean, the net of it is that one of Booz's own employees went to the government and leveraged one of these things folks don't understand exist, which is if you go to the government and you say that an approved government vendor operating on an approved government contract is basically taking advantage of or lying to the government will provide you the government's own prosecutors who prosecute that vendor. The government will help you prosecute itself. And most folks are like, what? And it's like, yes, this is all true. But unless you have some legal background or you've been through these things or you've been trained by folks that work in these lines of work, you don't know that stuff's there. So in that case, the woman who brought the litigation against her own former employer, she ended up getting 20-30% of what the government got paid in fines. And she got paid, I think it was over $20 million. So this is the thing: is even if there's an issue that you felt strongly about and you lose, you have to remember there's a ton of governance and a ton of investigative rights you have as a state citizen to go dig into that stuff and say, okay, fine, I didn't want that to pass, but now that it has, what's happening to the money? How's it being managed? How's it being enforced? Where's the audits? When did we bring in a third-party auditor to make sure that this is being managed correctly? I mean, it's classic Saul Alinsky stuff, but it works. You wear down the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and the other thing that you're bringing up there too is it just shows how where there can be some almost like a national form of neurolinguistic programming from the billionaire class that are really trying to make investments in how way things work and how the future is going to shape up, how they really reach out to the public and try to play to their baser instincts and their desires and reverse psychology, and then of course you add language manipulation on the ballots, and however you really just assault the senses. That's how you can manufacture consent in ways that people are not even detecting, and then there's just so much more above that with the way that there's just a fog of war in state governments and the relationship with the federal government, and so much unaccounted for money and the skim, because we're so out of balance with how money's supposed to be used stringently, and it's not supposed to be funding anything outside of what is in Article 1. There is just the skim is everywhere. And nobody even there's no way to even probably quantify how many billions of dollars are stolen from even small parties all throughout the year, because we're at the point where the norm is spending trillions. So I mean, it's one of those things that it keeps getting more and more disastrous and dizzying when you think of the scope and size of the monster in play here. But let me ask you something real quick about the cannabis initiative. Are you of the belief, I don't even know if it's belief, I think there actually might be a fact pattern there, but that whenever there is legalization, recreational marijuana, that if it's recreational in a red state, it is very, very, it's not too much longer after that it goes blue. Do you believe that there is a correlation between getting everybody legalized recreationally and having their values loosen up a little bit and we slip into Democrat land, or is that just a coincidence?
I think that's interesting. I had not heard that before, but I had heard that in relation to other things. It's an interesting idea. It's an interesting theory. I think if we take a look at I won't say obvious, but one of the more obvious of the states that have legalized in the case of Colorado. Colorado was already moving toward becoming quote unquote blue. There's a couple of other states out there that were already kind of trending in that direction. Will some of these other states that are passing these marijuana initiatives suddenly go from red to purple or red to blue? I don't know. We'll have to look at the data. But I think in a couple of those states where that's happened, if you look at their history politically, the likelihood of them going blue or changing significantly on a political spectrum is fairly thin, in my opinion, unless we have more data along those lines. But the other thing too that's interesting is when Colorado first did this, and this is a classic lying with statistics. When Colorado first did this, a number of U.S. states were like, hey, we got to get on this bandwagon. Look how much money Colorado's making in taxes. And it's like, yeah, but for God's sakes, I mean, just common sense, folks. As soon as other U.S. states start doing this, because where was Colorado making a lot of that money? Well, they were making it from marijuana tourism. And that went out the window as soon as other states who also had wealthy populations who could afford to travel to Colorado to go experiment with cannabis or edibles or whatever it might be. So now that it's more spread out, Colorado's tax revenue has been plummeting. And so for certain political science monitors who are trying to stay objective and not get too emotional about these topics, which is hard to do, it's a similar problem for Colorado losing tax revenue that North Dakota has every 5 to 8 years. There's a bumper sticker in North Dakota that tends to pop up periodically that says, "Please, Lord, if we find oil again in our state, we swear this time we won't screw up the tax money." Because, and then they have a little line that crosses out what year it was, because and I'm a little older, but I mean, I remember in 1988 when North Dakota and certain western states were exploring and exploiting their oil reserves and opportunities that were their natural gas, especially with T-Boone Pickens. But North Dakota's gone through this boom or bust cycle a number of times. In their case, it was petrochemical, and we had it again in 2007, 2008. There's been a couple of other times, but when fracking was deployed, which is controversial in its own right. But yeah, it will be interesting to also see, did several U.S. states deceive themselves? Please see the previous comments I just made about holding your own government accountable. Did several U.S. states deceive themselves into believing, oh, we can count on whatever, 5-10% more tax revenue from having cannabis legalized? Because it's like, look, this is kind of like, I live in a town. It's kind of like a medium-sized city, and it keeps having the same problem that every time somebody builds a shopping mall, the same number of shoppers go there than other places. It's just the same number of people. You're just giving them a different place to go. They're just kind of, it's the old joke about, if we can't get a hold of beer, we'll shift to hard alcohol. How many folks who now are going to increase their use of cannabis or start using cannabis are simply going to switch away from say alcohol or something else? Yeah,
it's a good point. It's a good point there too, because as I always say, that whenever I've been able to go to a couple of different states that have this this recreational legalized, and going into a dispensary is really, I don't know, it's a fun kind of a Willy Wonka experience. If you've never been in there before, but you're just taken back, and you're like, wow, look at all the varieties, and this is all legal, right? So, but when you look at the prices compared to the guy down the street that you've been buying from for years, it doesn't really change much. So I don't know. And when I asked you about whether or not recreational initiatives does have a tendency of changing red states blue, it wasn't because I have a conviction one way or another. I just see some people theorize about that, and because I certainly don't think that recreational does much to change people's habits, because most people have been doing it the whole time anyway. So I don't know. I guess I have to look a little bit more into that myself. I do want to bring something else, because you mentioned boom and bust. And I want to go on a little bit bigger scale with you. Now, I was reading a article on Zero Hedge. It focused around an interview that Martin Armstrong did recently. And let me get it up here on the screen. Legendary financial geopolitical cycle analyst Martin Armstrong began 2023 predicting chaos would be coming to the world. And now he says, is this kind of destabilization a coincidence, or is it a deep state globalist plan? This is Ukraine, Gaza and Israel, wide open borders, FBI predicting huge terror attacks, all that stuff. He says, he was asked, why are the demonic dark powers taking peace from the earth and forecasting big terror events coming to the United States? And Armstrong contends it is very simple. Basically, we are looking at a sovereign default. Governments are pushed to the limits at this stage. You even had Fed head Jay Powell come out last week and say the spending is unsustainable. The Biden administration is completely corrupt and an absolute disaster. It's not really Biden. He's just there to sign whatever they stick in front of him. So as far as the future that we have right here on the Great Reset timeline, we've got multiple wars opening up on different fronts. We already had a very over-leveraged dollar. We have a wide open border. It's true, but now we're starting to we're going back to Islamic terror forecasts. It feels like flashback to 20 years ago. Where do you see this all going right now, especially with the dollar hanging in the balance? There needs to be a transition away from that at some point. I know every time that you and me and V get on the phone in our respective shows, we're always talking about how it's the end of the dollar. But Peter Schiff has been saying that it's the end of the dollar for as long as I've known about his work. Ron Paul, I mean, I know eventually, I mean, there has to be no tricks left in the bag over there, but we're hanging around, it seems.
I've been vigorously jotting down some notes over here in my notebook while you and I are talking with your audience, because I want to make sure I stay on topic, which unfortunately is why I have to write out my shows in advance on Rogue, or else I'll end up somehow getting into the Mycenaean Greeks.
Yeah.
While talking about treasury bills. The first point is a number of us on the Rogue team. Now, as the old joke goes with economists, you can ask 4 economists who are all on the same side of a particular issue, but yet you'll still get 4 different answers. A number of us on Rogue are loosely put in alignment on the following, which is that there's been a battle between certain central bank leaders globally, and Jerome Powell is one of them, or other key economic officials in certain countries who've taken on a more nationalist tone or a more nationalist focus on what they're doing. And to oversimplify, what does that mean in dog ears? Well, it means that they're not too keen on going along anymore with what's coming out of Switzerland, or said loosely, the Davos crowd out of Switzerland. And for those of you who know the content we do on Rogue, and there's others of us out there that have a similar viewpoint, behind these shadows to us is the organization known as the London Corporation. So that said, Jerome Powell right now, in a strange twist for us, is in a battle with Janet Yellen over at Treasury. And it's because Treasury and Janet and others like her are holdovers from the Obama administration, which, small sidebar, we made note on one of our programs recently that we found it interesting that if they're referring to Donald Trump, or they're referring to even Jimmy Carter, who obviously is in very ill health, they always describe them as the former president, or in the case of Donald Trump, they just say Donald Trump. But anytime anyone mentions Barack Obama, it's always President Obama. And I'm like, my colleagues and I are smiling, but getting a slight chill when we hear that, because it's like, yeah, you all still can't bring yourselves to say it out loud, but he's still technically in charge, because it's not Joe Biden.
Right.
So that said, you've got a lot of folks out there right now in Japan, in China, in Europe, for and against with inside Germany, definitely in Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, a lot of the Eastern European countries, Turkey, also Algeria and Morocco. All of these countries right now are fighting it out with either, I want to look out for what's right for us as a nation, versus, no, we got to go with what the Swiss are telling us. And when I say the Swiss, folks, I'm being rather loose when I say that. So to your other point, Frank, this thing about the dollar, that also to many of us is kind of a coded reference. When you hear people say, well, the dollar, America, the dollar, there's a lot going on there, because the dollar is still a reserve currency. It's still a fiat currency, to use economics or political science terms. It's still a fiat currency. It's supposed to, quote unquote, stand for something, which at one time was based on precious metals, which now we're just going on the faith of our governments, which is somewhere north of hell. Mm-hmm. But the dollar is still the benchmark. And then the big one that I don't want to say no one talks about, because there's a number of people who do say this, but it's the assumption. It's the thing that the big people know when they're talking about the dollar, but no one wants to, like, kind of, for those of you playing the home game, we would just like to remind you that when we say the dollar, one of the many things that really means is our precious metals being denominated by central banks. Because you better believe, we've covered on Rogue extensively the last 2 to 3 years, how much bullion, and I don't just mean gold, I'm talking about platinum, palladium, hell, even copper, in some cases, industrial materials. These banks have been acquiring to try and bolster something of substance for their currencies. But the real big one, folks, is anytime we start talking about the dollar, what we're really talking about is energy. We're talking about oil being denominated in dollars. Now, that's the one that even people that are on the whole thing's crashing, even those folks don't want to say out loud that it's like, yeah, but like if all of a sudden we wake up one morning and they're denominating oil in Saudi currency or Chinese renminbi, well, I mean, holy crap, that's a major, major thing that just happened. Because as long as energy is still denominated in dollars, then the U.S. economy can still be run based on how many dollars for a barrel of oil. Mm-hmm. Now, This is also a rather interesting little sidebar, and it does relate. But I've been covering on a couple of my programs on Rogue about how, as I often tell my audience, stay with me. There's a number of key shipwrecks, Frank, all around the world. There's about 8. We covered each of them individually. Who was the vessel? When did it sink? What was on board?
Actual shipwrecks. You're talking actual shipwrecks.
Oh yeah,
like this Spanish galleon we just learned about off the coast of Colombia yesterday.
Yes, and we were talking about the San Jose 2 years ago. And the thing about the San Jose, folks, is that, loosely put, it was a Spanish galleon. It had a lot of cargo on board, and it basically got jumped by the British Navy. They sank it. They actually dropped a shell into the powder magazine on the vessel and blew it sky high. The thing is that folks have been looking for that ship for some time. They did finally find it a couple of years ago, and the estimates, and I'm using air quotes on this side of my monitor, the estimate is she's got about $20 billion of uncut emeralds, gold bars, gold coins, a whole bunch of other stuff. Then there's, of course, the numismatic value of that stuff, and the list goes on. There's a whole bunch of these shipwrecks around the world. But the thing that isn't really covered is the minute somebody finds one of these, or the minute somebody starts wanting to dive on one of these vessels, all of a sudden international courts start coming to life. And in the case of the San Jose, yes, Frank, to your point, it was announced this week on the Daily Mail and a couple of other news sites that the Colombian government has said, hey, as soon as the current president's out of office, and by the way, folks, that's code for something. I'm not going to get into that, but there's a coded reference why they're waiting until that president's out of office. But that they're going to finally dive on that vessel and they're going to bring the contents up. And of course, it was within an hour that Spain, Britain, a whole bunch of other countries all said, and we'll see you in court. Now, I'm joking, but not really.
And the American divers who've actually found it.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And so, loosely put, what's the big deal? Well, there's no other way to say it. The big deal is this is real, actual money.
Yeah.
I don't mean, oh, yeah, I've got a Spanish doubloon. It's even simpler than that. I've got a freaking gold bar. If I've got $1 million in paper money sitting somewhere on a pallet, no matter what paper money that is, no matter whose it is, it starts depreciating the second it's sitting on that pallet. That gold bar does not depreciate. So no one really wants to get into this outside of certain kind of circles of people, but there's a huge amount of hand-wringing going on anytime somebody wants to go pull the cargo of any of these ships up, because now Colombia is stepping into the international environment while we're possibly moving to a digital economy. But before everything goes digital, as the old saying goes, we got to figure out how we're going to pay all these debts. Colombia gets to sit at a better chair at the table if they come walking in with $20 billion of real money. Now, in my opinion, it won't work out that way, I'm sure. And this has happened before. It happened off the coast of Gibraltar a couple of years ago, that there was a vessel where its contents were split up between, I think, Morocco, Britain, and I don't know who the hell else was involved in that. I'm sure the Colombians will have to cough up part of the haul to other players. But it's always interesting to watch anytime one of these vessels that went down, even hundreds of years ago, if there's a valuable cargo on board of metallic money, it's interesting how angry and serious major governments get very quickly. I mean, we don't want to do much about the American southern border, but by God and heck, somebody's pulling gold out of the water in some part of the world, and the State Department wants to know everything that's going on with that. It's like you can tell what matters to these people.
Well, let me ask you this, of course, this all ties into the fact that everybody's wondering about. Armstrong went on to say, here's another thing I had here. He thinks the U.S. dollar will get stronger because capital will flow to the U.S. in times of crisis and war. Armstrong thinks Hamas has won the public relations war and is trying to isolate Israel on the world stage. This attack is much deeper than anyone imagines, he says. He also went on to comment and say, get tangible assets, and includes gold and silver core assets. He also thinks the global economy will implode, but that the USA will go down last. He says that the economy will tank in the U.S., but it will be much worse in blue states and things like that. So you're thinking that a major part, obviously, if there is an implosion, I mean, you're talking about someone like like Powell actually wanting to be a little bit more nationally focused and not go with the Davos crowd, but at the same time, everything else, it looks like it's being set up for imploding and taking away the last of the wealth in in the old banking system by having it expended on wars and leaving the southern borders open in the West and continuing the migrant crisis in the East as well. So, I mean, it seems like if there is any resistance from people like Powell, it's not significant enough to stop what obviously is a planned demolition. So, I don't. How do you put a timeline on that, or do you think that even that is too soon to tell?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and you brought a number of very pertinent, items that are out there that folks are trying to delineate what's happening. There's folks better than me. Tom Luongo is one of them who can articulate much better than I can what Powell has been doing that is actually of benefit. It's one of these things that when these folks are battling it out, all of us at our level, unless you were lucky enough to bump into somebody on an airline flight, we're not going to get necessarily the bird's eye view of what's going on. We may, as the old saying goes, we may have to wait for the book to get written about what went on behind closed doors. A number of things that are going on is that, for instance, a number of U.S. banks, and I'll be very cautious about how I say this, there's a number of U.S. banks that are in shakier shape than you might believe. And Powell and others like him are aware of that. And so to the language you were using, Frank, about a controlled demolition, there are those out there that are of the opinion that what Powell is doing is that it's like they've got lists. They know which of the banks out there have problems. I'd rattle these off, but I'd rather not. But the net of it is they know who's got troubles. And if you look at a couple of months ago, Chase acquired a bank that, ironically, Chase had tried to acquire that bank, and the Europeans and the United States said, no, Jamie, you can't do that. That would create an unfair advantage. And as soon as that bank was in financial trouble, all of a sudden it's like, hey, Jamie, you got the money on hand? We'll let you buy it today. But for those of us, again, playing the home game, the thing you have to keep in mind is that there was no period of the government having to get involved and pump in money and calm down investors and this, that, and the other. It literally was in the middle of the night, boom, your bank is now owned by Chase. So it's like, give it a minute, but you'll be able to get your money out here shortly. You'll be okay. But there's other banks out there, and I'm using the kind of conspiratorial there's other banks out there that they want to close down because they know that, I don't want to use the word insolvent, but they've got problems. And there's a lot of trickery in how they do this. They tend to buy up and mess with bonds and things, lines of credit that these banks have to kind of all of a sudden in the middle of the night force them into a corner and say, hi, you're now the property of Bank of America or whoever it may be. So that will be going on. And of course, the last thing we want is less places or less competition in banking. And on the topic of the Fed too, I mean, it's there's no other way to say it. It's the enemy. My enemy is my friend. Most of us at Rogue are violently against the Federal Reserve and its very existence. But it's like at the same time right now, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Powell is really causing great pain to a lot of the Swiss-minded globalist folks out there, which I'm a fan. But I mean, the other thing too is that I've literally lit candles for the man at my church, praying to God he doesn't have a car accident, because it's like he is causing great pain to some very powerful people. Wars have been, and I'm not just saying that facetiously, wars have been started over this stuff. Wars are being fought right now. And to some of the other comments you were making, I mean, that's where it starts getting kind of hazy, between what's going on in Gaza, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, never mind the fact that we still have Armenia and Azerbaijan fighting it out. There's some other problems in a couple other parts of the world that have kind of missed the media's attention. So we've got a lot of conflicts out there, and any one of them that they could leverage for whatever they want to do with it. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be dicey for a while. It's going to be challenging for a lot of people. I've had folks on our program ask us, should I buy gold or whatever? And it's like, well, not to be indelicate, and this is only my own opinion, and I'm not a financial planner, unless you're buying futures out of a mining operation in Indonesia, I don't know that stockpiling precious metals, unless that's your thing, is necessarily something you want to do. But you certainly want to diversify, and you certainly want to take a look at what you're doing with your own money. I know Mike Moore over at True Pundit ran a piece a couple of times now where he's advised folks to look into credit cards that offer zero interest if you transfer over a balance, to just buy yourself some time to get debt down.
Well, I was looking at, that's always been my approach there too. I tend to think that for little people who don't really have a lot to throw around there, one of the easiest way to diversify is to own some physical assets like gold and silver, just because it's other people have enough bankroll to park it into land. They can park it into Lamborghinis and put it in a special warehouse. But this is a feasible way for us to. The other thing there is, how much are you going to stack? Because if you have to get up and go, if you have to get up and go, and you have much more than a very hefty shoebox worth of neatly stacked silver and gold and all that stuff, then what's the point there too? You can't be very mobile. This shit is heavy. You need a place to store it. So if we're talking about a world that is on the brink of calamity, and even that calamity, that instability can transfer into regional conflicts even in the United States, then I guess the big question for the future is, how mobile can you be? So you can't be dragging around hundreds of pounds of silver all the way. So it's I understand about that aspect. There is a limit to everything, but people who haven't done anything should at least consider it. Now, I want to move into the final chapter.
Could I hold you on that point for just 1 second? Let me throw a soundbite or two out there. Well, and this is where Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad Poor Dad fame, he and others like him often talk about vaulting. And you have to be careful with vaulting, because like banks here in the United States will say, oh, we can vault your precious metals or what have you. And I don't mean it the way I'm saying it, but for people that are somewhat paranoid, and perhaps your paranoia has reason, Singapore and some other countries out there, strangely enough, even Vancouver, Canada. I mean, I wouldn't trust the Canadian government right now as far as I can throw it, but the folks that run Vancouver are not really the folks that are in Ontario. So there's some vaulting options if that's your thing up there that you can explore. Again, I'm not a financial planner, but these are things to research, and that is the other kind of big takeaway, Frank, whether it's, well, I'm just going to put my efforts into prepping, or other folks that are like, no, I'd like to have some gold in the house or whatever it might be, or just, our program, I know many others out there have been saying the same thing. We advise folks to just keep a couple $100 in cash if you can, in your house or where you live, just to have it handy, quote unquote, just in case, especially, quite frankly, with no pun intended, with some of the problems that have been having just the last 2 to 3 weeks now, with folks having difficulty either withdrawing cash out of the bank, or the other thing that's been happening in a number of states is folks are depositing checks, but the funds are not available for like days at a time. It's not just 24 hours. So I
saw that, and so then here's the other where I want to move next, because I did see those stories about banks who are just shutting down people, and it. Like I said, when there's less options there, it becomes a little bit more nerve-wracking. So whether we're talking about, just to expand that, consolidated banking due to booms and busts and collapses and merges and all that stuff, whether it be consolidated banking or consolidated power in government, we are looking at a multipolar world soon. I mean, there is definitely a line in the sand between what the West, the supposed West, and NATO, which to me really looks like the new Soviet Union, and then you have China and Russia, the BRICS nations. You have the American dollar, the petrodollar. There's all these things that are going on where the real power in the world, even militarily, is up for grabs. What Russia has put on as far as military show in Ukraine has, for everybody who's being honest about what is being put on display out there, is very impressive, and they get more and more efficient as the times go on. We are essentially sharpening their sword for them. And we're over here, we've got a major cultural crisis. We are at war with ourselves spiritually, and God knows how else that turns into something more of a conflict for us. We are financially unstable. The Pentagon seems to think that we have enough weapons to not only supply Ukraine forever, but also Israel forever, and then I guess whatever enemy or so-called enemy we're going to spit in the eye of next. There just seems to be a breaking point here where the old way of doing things the last 40 to 50 years is definitely at the end. The United States looks like a joke, okay? They look like a joke to me. So I have to imagine that everybody else, I mean, it's still a dangerous joke because obviously we are being driven out into the world in very dangerous, aggressive ways by people who are acting with reckless abandon. They seem to think that where they will get hundreds of thousands of little people killed, that will ultimately pass over their house. And I wonder what you think a multipolar world looks like after all of this, is that whatever we reach a conclusion, well, what's going on with these multiple wars and all of the previously stated goals of resetting the planet. I mean, this is all very publicly published stuff about how the entire world wanted to be remade economically, socially, religiously, everything together. So the average person who looks into this stuff sees these wars opening up systematically, expanding meticulously. The economic situation is untenable. So we wonder, all right, are we being pushed into the next phase of our existence? And what does that world look like? Who are the big powers? And where do we go from there? So describe the multipolar world after whatever we're living through right now reaches its planned conclusion.
Sure. And a little color for all of you in the audience. Especially for the academic world, polarity has often been a reference, especially since the end of World War II, to the world having two major superpowers at the end of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War period from 1945 onward. That basically the United States and the West had economic, political, and social control of a chunk of the planet, and the Soviet Union had the other chunk. Then, after 1991 and the collapse of the Soviet Union, we entered what was known as a unipolar world. Now, for certain parties out there that are of the belief of the influence of the Lenin Corporation, they would tell you that we've been in a unipolar world since the 1850s, and I definitely see their point, and you could make that argument. But that said, as far as all the stuff that we used on this planet to run the world, the United Nations, international, what are, again, it's just the parlance, the way they call these things. They call them international regimes, but it's things like international trade organizations. Countries sit on these things and say what weights and measures should be. And then the big one to what Frank and I have been talking about this evening, which is this thing about gold, how currencies are converted, et cetera. So during the quote-unquote unipolar world, post-end of the Cold War in 1991 through the 1990s into the early 2000s, the United States, basically by default, was just kind of saying, okay, here's how things are going to be. There were variations on a theme, and there were still some wars out there, but on the whole, the United States was kind of directing things. Now we're entering into a period where, and the word weakening needs its own definition, but there's a weakening of the United States militarily, politically, and economically around the world. And all those institutions I just mentioned have also gotten weaker. So I'll be covering this in more detail, in fact, on my program this Friday over at Rogue News, where I'll be getting into, loosely put, how we are essentially moving into, forgive the use of the term, but we're moving into a world that runs like global mafia.
Mm-hmm.
That, what is the definition of mafia? Well, it's organized organizations or families who, and again, it's a very loose definition, but who they derive their income from something that is considered illegal. So they're still business people, but they make money doing things that are outside what we consider the law. The problem is we're living in a world where, again, it's a very kind of gross example, but earlier this year, the United States government voted $100 billion for Ukraine. Now, we've heard in the news of $100 million here, $200 million there, $5 billion here, $5 billion there. But we got to go back in time to like last spring. The Senate and the House voted on this thing, and there wasn't a peep out of either of the two major political parties. They still wanted to go back to yelling at each other about what we're going to name the airport. So we moved $100 billion out of this country to another country that even CNN, before the shooting started, even CNN was doing documentaries about how much graft and corruption and laundering there is in Ukraine. And the joke amongst some people I know and some of the folks we have over at Rogue is they might have just moved that money through Sicily or Sardinia or a couple of other countries out there where you do that sort of thing, but just nobody could handle that big a number, so they had to move it through Ukraine. So it's not just that we're moving into a multipolar world. What would that mean by a political science definition? Well, it would mean that China and Russia have certain levels of power and authority in the world, and so does the United States, and so does Britain, and so does France, and Japan, and the list goes on. But if we viewed that in the terms of, say, the 1970s, even the United States and the Soviet Union had trade. Even those two countries who were technically in a state of war still had civil dealings with one another. So the more interesting question we have to ask is, why is there conflict in a multipolar world if we're just dealing with a world that is no longer unilaterally kind of directed by the United States, but just has other people sitting at the table? I mean, in theory, that's what the darn United Nations was supposed to be about, even though that was always a bogus institution. So the more important takeaway here is we've got multipolar conflict. And the question is, what's causing that conflict? Well, the conflict is coming about because, again, depending on who you talk to and your view, the Great Reset, quote unquote, post 2008, and again, the completely out of the blue, we never saw it coming events of 2019, and I'll just leave that where it is. All of these things have horrendously impacted the world. And this was supposed to be kind of a neo-feudalistic environment run out of Switzerland. Again, that's a gross simplification, but that broke down. That was the plan, but that's been breaking down ever since 2019. So now what we've got is China and Russia have both their own as well as unified goals. Japan is trying to figure out what they're going to do, both militarily, economically, and socially, because they just don't have the population to deal with some of their neighbors. And you have the United States, who has a whole bunch of people, evidently, who've been blackmailed to the eyeballs to such a degree that they can be made to vote on a $100 billion piece of funding for a country that has no importance to us whatsoever. But by God and heck, we're going to argue for weeks over who's the Speaker of the House. I mean,
incredible. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's a
circus, man. It's a damn circus.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm gonna drive towards is a little bit more detail this Friday in our work over at Rogue. For any of you who'd like to listen in on that, is we're gonna dive a little bit more deeply into who and what exactly is going on. And I use the word mafia simply because it's something people can get their heads around. There's a little bit more going on with it than that. But I mean, loosely put, we have government leaders and Mitch McConnell, and a whole bunch of other people out there, including Nancy Pelosi and others. We've got elected representatives who've been on the payroll of a number of other parties who do not have the interests of this country or any country at heart. And this is where the whole thing about Jerome Powell and others who no doubt have their own goals and their own objectives, and it doesn't mean necessarily we're all going to agree with what they're trying to do, but they're at least not trying to what's the old saying, Frank, there out on the East Coast, that like if somebody's having a going out of business sale, it's you're literally unbolting the furniture out of the store and selling that too. I mean, we've had a whole bunch of people that have been treating the United States for the last 20 years like an everything must go sale.
Yeah.
And you've got people like Powell and others who are saying, hold on a minute, like, yeah, we're all on the take, but there's a limit to how much of the take there can be. Like, you're not the parasite is not supposed to kill the host, and that's what a number of people. And again, it's a gross simplification. You got the number of people globally who are of the opinion you're killing the host, and we can't have that.
Well, I tend to think that killing the host is something that's necessary with this kind of a transition, because if you can create enough war and enough chaos, and then have the collapse come economically around that same time, then you can almost you have to find a way to skirt responsibility for the graft that's been going on for the 100 years or so that the central bank system has been in place. So I actually think that that killing the host is a necessary part of the wrap up and the cover up, as the same robber barons go then to present us with a new system that will they once again control. That's the way I can see this. I don't know how, because I don't know how this can go on for much longer. Let me ask you one last question though, because it's related. This is something I have grappled with on this show before, just speaking out loud, and I've opened it up for callers out there. And since you spend a lot of time talking about this, I'd like to pose it to you. How do you see it with Ukraine in particular? How do you see the Ukraine situation getting wrapped up as they are now. Everybody's walking back the chances of victory. They're finally being honest after 2 years, hundreds of billions and hundreds of thousands of lives lost for no reason whatsoever, aside from them saying, well, we had to do something. Putin was just trying to invade smaller, helpless countries. Tell me, what do you think is going to be a part of the conclusion in Ukraine in particular? Because like I said the other night, it's not enough for Russia just to be left with the ethnic Russian eastern provinces that they have secured long, long ago. They have said from the beginning they need Ukraine to be a neutral buffer devoid of NATO interests. So whatever is left of Ukraine is going to have to be that very same buffer devoid of NATO interests. I don't see Victoria Nuland's sorority packing up their bags and actually leaving. Do you?
No, and I, to just stay very tight on this topic, the conflict in Ukraine will have to come to an end. It will have to come to an end. And I know Colonel McGregor is one of the folks who've been talking about this. I also know folks that are highly critical of Colonel McGregor. But you know, I know my way around the defense industry. I worked in it for a number of years. The Ukrainians don't have the numbers, they don't have the people, and even mercenaries don't want to work for them anymore. It's a horrific, god-awful mess. They've lost an immense amount of their population, both due to people fleeing the country as well as conscripted into the military. The war will have to be brought to an end somehow. It will have to be done in such a way that the various major players can all claim, quote unquote, we won. No one in Ukraine is going to win on this one. But the other thing about Ukraine people forget is, and I've mentioned this, I think, on one of your prior shows, Frank, where you were kind enough to let me appear. My own ethnic background is Russian, in part. I'm also half Scottish. Before my people fled in the middle of the night when they murdered our emperor, Ukraine, or the region of Ukraine, was always vitally important to Imperial Russia, and it was always vitally important to the Soviet Union. Why? Well, because the region is known as the steppe, or the steppe region. It is the breadbasket of Europe. It always has been, and it is an immense food-producing region in the world. And no matter what happens with the end of the conflict, the ability of Ukraine to start producing food again is, there's no other way to say it, is immensely critical. I have a bad feeling that it's just going to be a rusted out hulk of what it was before the conflict started. Russia will no doubt continue to bolster its borders and continue its military reinforcement on the border. But I think Ukraine will just continue to be, unfortunately, a hub of human trafficking, money laundering, narcotic trafficking, and everything it was before this got started, but even worse because now everybody is more desperate. You don't have, the industry and other things. There's a lot of very powerful people who, and a lot of very well-read people who have been putting out articles and videos and things talking about plans. There's a certain somebody I won't mention, but he's been very keen for the 2 years of this conflict, saying when the smoke clears, the United States is going to have 2 military bases in Ukraine. Now, whether or not that happens, I don't know. But on your topic about, although I would suspect it will, on your topic of war, again, not to oversimplify, but this is November and it is the 60th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination later this month. This is again a topic I know we've covered. I know a lot of other folks out there in the alternative space have covered it. It's much more clear, I think, now that what John F. Kennedy, and he had his faults and they were immense, but one of the things Kennedy was trying to do was, Kennedy and those who backed him, people that we only know as rumor and innuendo, they knew that the global economy, and there's no other way to say this, people say what I'm about to say, but it's like if you really internalize what I'm saying, you realize the horror of it, that the global economic environment really cannot operate economically without war and the constant preparation for war. I know there's that famous line out of the movie JFK. What Kennedy supposedly was trying to do was shift the U.S. economy to a space-based economy, more exploration of space and so on, for the simple reason, and again, I'm oversimplifying, but it's a function of numbers. We need something that employs a lot of people, and it's either going to be global war on a regular basis or it's space exploration. Now, that is a gross simplification, but it doesn't make it any less true. And it's kind of the same thing here. They have to have these conflicts going on because there's so much of especially the Western European economies and the U.S. economy that is tied to defense contracting and similar. One other quick data point is, and I think it was McGregor, it may not be, I forget who. Somebody recently brought up a very powerful and a very important point, which was at the height of World War II, the United States had like four-star generals. And as I'm speaking with all of you and Frank tonight, we have like over 100 or more. And it's like, what in the name of God do we need 100 four-star generals for? I mean, who are we fighting? With whom are we at war other than half the planet? I mean, that's part of your problem is and as a former defense contracting person myself, I just got done reading this week a number of articles about high-ranking naval officials and others that have all signed on with defense contractors and so on, because they didn't make big money working for the Department of Defense, but they sure as heck will make big money working in the defense space.
Yeah.
And if there's no major conflicts out there or fear of conflicts to justify, I mean, I live near a couple very large U.S. government research towns, and I can assure you, just based on the job openings, they are open for business. The amount of money pouring in to the defense contracting sector right now in radar research, conflict research, especially drones, UAVs, and similar technologies. After what happened, there were a lot of lessons learned in Ukraine. We covered it in one of our shows recently. Man, they can't wait to start spending that money. Of course, the question is, what's that money denominated in, and it will be worth anything? That's a whole other topic. And Jerome Powell, I'm sure, is someone they're keeping a close eye on.
Yes.
But that said, yeah, the Ukraine, they're going to have to turn Ukraine off. There's just no way, because if that thing spills over, all of those NATO allies who are getting along right now are not going to get along. And I don't mean they're going to choose sides over, well, we're going to support Russia or we're going to support Ukraine. It'll be a little worse, in my opinion. It will be all the old hatreds and all the old angers in Europe, where Poland is going to start remembering how pissed off they are at Germany about some things that are still not resolved. Romania and Bulgaria will start getting involved about their borders, because there's already been, I think it's 6 million refugees out of Ukraine, which is horrible. And they've settled all throughout Europe. And unlike a lot of North Africans who were brought into Europe as cheap labor, the Ukrainian refugees are a different kind of problem. And everybody in Europe does not want that on their doorstep. And if Ukraine gets any worse, the flood of folks coming out of there will not only continue to be a problem for those countries, those countries will also deal with their own people fleeing.
How would you, just to jump on that real quick, but what is the difference between Ukrainian refugees being dispersed throughout Europe and, let's say, North African migrants showing up and sleeping in the town squares in Paris?
To oversimplify, because the Ukrainian refugees in many cases are highly trained.
Okay.
We have to remember, and I hate to say it.
So Ukrainian refugees would actually displace people, natives in the job market a lot quicker.
Yes, they have that potential. They have trained screw machine. I know this from some industries I've worked in over the years, Frank. They've got trained screw machinists and metal fabrication people and similar. There's a lot of American work that can't be done in our country anymore that has been farmed out to Poland, Romania, Bulgaria. In fact, I know for a fact that Honeywell out in Phoenix has a whole slew of Eastern Europeans that have moved into town to take over jobs that we just don't train Americans to do anymore. The work is still being done here in the United States, but it's strangely enough being done by people for whom English is a second or third language. It's no different than not Peter Zehan, but when Zehan, and I know Zehan is not like a number of my colleagues, and I don't trust Zehan very much, but I'm trying to think of George Friedman. George Friedman for years talked about this thing about when it comes to immigration in the United States, or more loosely labor coming across our borders, that the people who want unfettered labor entering the United States are better organized and have more money than the people that are trying to uphold the rule of law. There's a whole host of businesses across the United States, including state governments, quite frankly, that want to leverage that labor. And regardless of one's politics, and I truly mean that because I have friends on the left and on the right, even my left-leaning friends and I will be in complete agreement about the fact that these folks have no rights in the United States. They're in the country illegally. So we stick them in meatpacking, we put them in other high-risk jobs, and everybody just kind of turns a blind eye. That's what happened, or what they wanted to happen, with all of that North African labor and Syrian labor that entered Europe, because it was low-skilled, young. They could just kind of throw people at the work they needed performed. But the Ukrainians, in most cases, are highly skilled, trained, certainly higher trained than the cheap labor they brought in from North Africa.
Very
and
interesting.
From Syria.
I'm glad that you articulated that point, because it makes a lot of sense. It really does. I gotta thank you, Veles. You know, it's been way too long since you've been on. We have to do this more often, and I'm really upset that that V couldn't be here tonight. But I'm sure that we'll rectify this over the next couple of days. We'll talk it out and put something else on the agenda here. But if you can let everybody know your broadcast schedule, and I also want to know what URL you want to promote the most, so I can get it into the episode description, aside from just plugging Rogue News, the channel on
Sure.
YouTube. Tell everybody where to find your work, how often you broadcast, and anything else they need to know to keep up with you.
Sure. And thanks again, Frank, for having me on. And V was very sorry about what he's trying to tackle on his end that pulled him off. He very much does want to appear on your program when it makes sense, and or the two of us together. So that said, folks, my Veles program is on Fridays at 11. When I'm doing it, I do travel a bit for work, so there's some weeks where I don't have a program. You can find us on Twitch at www.twitch.tv/ and it's all one word, RogueNewsTV. And it's not just my programs. Our colleagues, Tim, what do you call it? We just had Tim on the other day, Tim Kirby, and Gus and V does his programs, and Algo Cowboy, who does a lot of the crypto and financial stuff. All of that, you can watch some of those programs on Twitch. They're available there. The other one is Rumble. If you go to / Rogue News, one word. Now on. We're trying to clean it up a bit, so forgive me. This is and I know Frank knows this, when you're trying to manage these things when we have other stuff we do in our lives other than these programs. But there's 2 Rogue News IDs out there on Rumble. You want the one that has a couple of hundred followers, not the one that has a couple of thousand. Our
Really?
Current programs are
yeah. Okay. So what's the one with the couple? I see the couple of hundred. So that's the one you want?
It's got like 469 or whatever. That's our more current presence. We're forgive me, me and V are down in the basement with a mop right now trying to clean up some stuff. But we're still out there, and like you, Frank, I mean, we're on YouTube. You can find us on YouTube, but much like you experienced, Frank, we get kicked off YouTube pretty regularly. So I don't want folks just saying, oh, well, I'll just find you guys on YouTube. So the 2 best places to find us are Twitch and Rogue News. And as often the case with Twitch, our programs are usually only available for about 2 or 3 weeks after we do one. So just be mindful of that. If you're looking for the longer legacy stuff, then Rumble is probably the best place.
Well, I'm happy you're on again, and thanks a lot, my friend. I hope people go check you out. And until next time, you really very graciously share a lot of your thoughts and your experiences, and it's been a good ride. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There is Veles, Rogue News. Good guy, and it's been way too long. I think he was on in 2022. This is definitely the first time this year that he's been on, but I'm glad that the treasure, the sunken ships and the treasure came up. Because it started making me wonder. Now, I understand that going to recover anything like that, precious metals, precious gems, anything like that at the bottom of the ocean, that seems like tedious work. Especially a ship that was sunk, the what is it, the San Jose? I believe that the date of its sinking was something like 1708, 1709. Man, you're talking 300 plus years. And for that to be at the bottom of the ocean for 300 plus years, you got to imagine that even if you recovered a couple of tons of all that booty down there, think about how far it's been spread just by the way that the ocean floor shifts and the current and all that stuff. Man, there must be so much. Can you imagine if we could drain the oceans just for one day and then put it all back? The one day wouldn't be enough, but that would be scary to see what's at the bottom of it. It really would be scary to see what's at the bottom. Definitely more than enough to start a new currency, a stable currency. Definitely more than enough. Wouldn't have to go into that's where you actually can see the difference between the bottom of the ocean and space. The fact that some people think it would be easier to go and mine an asteroid for precious metals and back a new currency than it would be to go down and find all of those ships and all of the precious cargo that's been lost over the centuries. But it's just so cold, so black. Can't see a goddamn thing down there. All right, we'll be right back. Thank you for hanging out. We'll be doing a little bit more on the other side of the break. So don't go anywhere.
It's intermission time, folks. Time out to press the like button. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to intermission.
We'll be right back.
Yeah, intermission. Yeah, intermission.
We're now entering, quite frankly.
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 Quite frankly. Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
We all support quite frankly.
Not quite.
Quite frankly.
Let's go, Brandon.
Quite frankly, in Roma, Italia.
Quite frankly. You going on Frank's show tonight?
I want to get a Coke. Can I get a Coke?
So everybody watch. Quite frankly, with Frank.
Quite frankly. How dare you?
Let's do some super chats and let's go to the Babylon Bee just to clean the palate. Jay Brits on quite frankly superchat.com says, Frank, I'm gay. Feels good to get out of your system, doesn't it, Jay? All right. Rumble Rants, Slim Pickens over there, and quite frankly.tv or pill.net. Either or. Robert Sarnes, thank you. NJSF, Sean Joe, Alan Wrench says thank you for not playing Hillary Clinton. Alan Wrench also says, for your pain and suffering of listening to Hillary, and threw me another couple of gold pills for that. Thank you. Sean Joe, Jay Sem says, hey Frank, what's going on, Jay? Paulie9363 says, FBI moving out of the District of Columbia. Are you sure about that? I didn't read about that. Where are they moving? Porpoiseful, thank you. Sean Joe, Jay Sims says, great show. I love when Veles is on. Got to make sure that he comes on at least twice in 2024. Captain Plint, Sea Blanche, Witchy Poo sends a ship, says Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. We did it. Again, over 10K in gold pills. Wow, thank you so much. Now, you know, I got to tell you guys, those are the types of things that are going to really help the show in the next couple of months. To hit new viewership goals on quitefrankly.tv and or pilled.net. Like I said, I'm going to be providing both links and making sure everybody is very comfortable in their transitioning over there. It's a transition you don't even have to lose your genitals over. Because we hit certain goals over there, things going to get really nice. Really, really nice. Because, again, we're forging connections that don't go away. That don't go away. There's nothing that's going to, there's never again will there be if I get some kind of a strike or something on YouTube, or the day that Twitch finally shits the bed, or whatever the hell else, there won't be people who don't see me for a week or 2 weeks and say, oh, where'd you go? Oh, so good to have you back. I was never gone. This is, I'm very excited about that. Very excited. And I had a couple of people still, express just some loving concern. Are you sure that you want to do this? I'll tell you something. When you do something for love, and when you do something and you're doing things that you love, and it is love that's driving it, everything's going to work out. It does. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a straight line from A to B, or a straight line from A into infinity. It can take a couple of corkscrews. It could be a dip, a dive, a pothole here and there. But I'm telling you, I have never loved this show more, and the possibilities continue to unfurl, and I can't wait to do more to the studio. I can't wait to spend some more time with the guys in that other room, because we've been making more and more, tailoring it more and more to make sure that we can do a lot more live performances there. And I'm not just talking about Set the Charge. I'm talking about bringing people in on a Saturday night and having a musical guest on a Saturday night here. That's aside from the fact that we have Akira the Don out there in Mexico, who is ready to do another intermission. You remember when Akira came on for our election night programming, and we did a little bit of a breakaway to him, and he did his performance. It was so awesome. We got to do more stuff like that. And it's a good time. Time to stay excited, especially since they're trying to make us get all worried about the new year. Don't worry. Head on a swivel. Thank you again, Captain Flint and everybody else out there. You're all fantastic people. Now let's go to the Babylon Bee. Let's take a look at some stuff here. First one up on the Babylon Bee. Here's a headline for you. New Grand Theft Auto. The new game will have an unlockable Soros DA mode where all crime is legal. So you can choose your difficulty, easy, medium, hard. But now, before easy is an even easier difficulty level. It's called Soros DA, where you can literally do anything, kill anybody, and you'll just be fine. That's it. I'm telling you, Rockstar Games, they know what they're doing. Here's a headline. Sad. Casting director for new Spider-Man movie unable to find an actor who hasn't already played Spider-Man. It's true. It's true. There's 10,000 of them out there. Headline. Man suspicious that Count Chocula not really part of a complete breakfast. I gotta tell you something. Count Chocula is one of those cereals that I have always wanted to try but never have. I don't know if my mother ever got it for us when we were kids, because we would request certain things, and she would never. My mom was not the type to say no. You're not having Count Chocula for breakfast. She would do it. She liked the Fruity Pebbles. We got the Cocoa Pebbles. We had Cocoa Puffs. Tricks. Kicks. Those popped up every once in a while, but they're kind of bland. What else is there? Frosted Flakes. We definitely got sugary cereals. Whenever we wanted to try something new. Oh, there was the Ghostbusters cereal. Maybe she did get us Count Chocula once. I don't remember it, though. I don't think it happened. Lucky Charms. The best snack cereal, one of the best snack cereal that I don't ever hear anybody talking about is Rice Krispie Treats cereal, where it's the clumps of Rice Krispie Treats. You put that into a bowl with some whole milk, maybe a little bit of half and half, so you get the creaminess up to the top level of the creaminess scale, and then you just let my mother would buy us boxes of that every once in a while, and it would be gone in a day. It was stupid. But Count Chocula, I think one of these days, you know what I'm going to do, right? No, Frank, don't do it. You know what I'm going to do, right? Maybe I'll get one of those sampler packs, a tiny one, just to say I know what it tastes like. Then again, do I really know what it used to taste like? Because nothing tastes the same. Anyway, Count Chocula, it is not a part of a complete breakfast. It is it's a stoner snack. Let's just be honest here. All right, headline, let's go. Republican Party checks into rehab for addiction to losing. I'm addicted to losing. I love losing. Here's another one for you. More grocery stores installing defibrillators at checkout for when you see your total. Oh, this is true. This is true. They get the AED right there. Headline, husband hospitalized after being crushed by avalanche of wife's bottles falling from shower shelf. Lauren's not that bad. She definitely has an arsenal. But she's not that bad. And the other thing here, too, is that she and Aurora really do most of their work with, showers and baths in one shower, and I usually use another. Just because of the placement in the house, and I like putting the radio on and stuff like that, so I figure, I don't want to be too close to the bedrooms and wake anybody up with my late night showers. Late night shower contemplations. Sit there and stare. Here you go. Anybody else? Is this anybody else in the shower? Is that anybody else in the shower? Just staring straight ahead? Get lost for 10 to 15 minutes, then, well, what's going on? So, anyway, everybody start taking pictures of yourself in the shower and send it to, quite frankly, I want to see your shower face. All right, here's another head for you. Not another head. The reason why I said head is because this guy's holding up a head. Thomas Kincaid Studios releases violent scenes of the Old Testament. Somebody always getting their head cut off in the Old Testament. But, wait, there's another one here. This is the one we'll end on. Harvard University installs new Jew detectors at all entrances. Just want to make sure how many of those Jews are coming on. Oh, man. All right, well, that's what I have for you. That's all I got for you tonight. On that front. Oh, here's another. On the war front for you, the Army just put out a new recruitment video. Together we can take on any challenge. Visit GoArmy.com, and it is not going over well. It's not going over well. And it's because of this. Here's a 30-second Army commercial that just came out. It's called Jump. Be all that you can be.
Stand up!
So now for those of you in podcast land who didn't see the 30 seconds I put up there, this is it's a 30-second paratrooper recruitment video. And what's happening here is that a lot of people see that all of a sudden, because, the war in Ukraine is doing its thing and all attention is being rolled over into this war in the Middle East that may expand and may call our involvement in there, boots on the ground, all that stuff. I saw that the United States military just struck targets in Syria today, so they're dropping bombs over there, if the bombs ever stop dropping. But this now that things are getting a little bit more serious in the world, it's incredible the timing of a 30-second paratrooper commercial wherein there is no diversity. There is no diversity. Every last man jumping is white. Every last man jumping is white. And everybody's everybody thinking the same thing, because the messaging is nonstop, it's consistent, and it's backed up by the rhetoric that is being put out there in every press conference across the military-industrial complex. That includes what's going on at the White House, the Joint Chiefs, all that stuff. And here, listen to some of these comments. This one guy left a quote from David Irving. Says, if the British soldiers in Normandy who went to the beaches in 1944 could see what happened today, they would not have gone 40 yards up the beach. I believe it. Another one says, I would like to join the military, but as a white heterosexual male, I don't want to take opportunities away from minorities. Here's another. Never fight for those who openly despise you. The Army is the Bud Light of service branches. We're not boycotting you. We've just abandoned your brand completely. Good luck with the diversity hires. Another person, here comes General Patton, says, we've defeated the wrong enemy. Oh, man, it goes on and on. They're getting destroyed. This is all over the place, getting destroyed. And it's true, the timing is just incredible, and it's noticeable by all. Where did all the diversity in the recruitment videos go now that we're getting into closer to fighting and dying again in far off lands? I don't know. Anywho, that's what I wanted to throw up there in your face. So you can give me a call. I'm going to open up the lines. It's 914-200. That's Rogue's. Rogue News, 914-200-0269. It is now open lines for the rest of the way. It's 8:42, and I want to see what the hell is going on with you. So get your phones warmed up, 914-200-0269, and we'll be back in a flash.
I don't know. I'm terrible at telling jokes, but a guy, his whole head is a giant pumpkin. His friend goes, what happened? He's like, I found this genie in a lamp, and he gave me 3 wishes. And he's like, what happened? He goes, well, the first wish I wished for like $100 million, and I got it. And then for my second wish, I wished for like a beautiful lady, and I got her. And the guy's like, yeah, but what happened? He's like, the third wish, that's where I really blew it. And the guy goes, what happened? He goes, I wish for a giant pumpkin head.
Howdy, friend. You looking for a message board? Go to quitefrankly.tv and enter the forum. Engage with official show topic threads or start your own thread. Get signed up. It's that easy. And it's not Reddit, so don't sweat it. For the forum and then so much more, it's quitefrankly.tv. Yeehaw.
few moments later.
Welcome to your Perpetual Health Minute, brought to you by Quite Frankly. Meat intake, it's going to shorten your life, right? Well, a paper published in 2022 in the International Journal of General Medicine looked at 175 different populations from around the world, and they found that meat intake, not carbohydrates, to be a significant predictor of life expectancy. And actually, in contrast, carbohydrates showed a weak to negative correlation with life expectancy. Now, when you combine that with the fact that today, the people of Hong Kong are both the longest lived and the highest consumers of meat per capita, a very different picture starts to emerge. Now remember, correlation is not causation. It doesn't mean that if you eat meat, you're guaranteed to live a longer life. But what it does mean is that meat is not going to shorten your life. Remember, there is a big difference between eating a pepperoni on a pizza and eating a grass-fed steak. If you like this video, please follow the new Perpetual Health Rumble channel. You can also find us at perpetualhealth.substack.com. But for now, thank you for watching, and on with the show.
Yes, please go follow our boy Jay Gulanello on his new Rumble channel, because you're going. Those are the 1 minute hits that he makes just for this show. But he does longer videos there, and he's going to continue to expand his own content. So follow up with him, because that is life-saving material. Life-saving. It really is. Save your life. Get healthy and get debt-free. Do whatever you can. Dedicate your entire being to those two things. All right, let's take some calls. First one up. You're on the air. Who's this?
Hey, Frank. This is Terry out here in L.A. How are you?
How are you, Terry? It's great to have you on. You sound very chilled out.
I'm very chilled out. I've been trying to get a hold of you for over a week about, have you ever touched an alien, right?
Uh-huh. Like Goldie Hawn?
Well, I have never, but an alien touched me.
Okay. Well, I want to hear it.
All right. It's quick. I was listening to a former YouTube channel, Mario Gatto Aladino, and he had channelings from different groups and different archangels, Archangel Michael, the Arcturians, Palladians, blah, blah, blah. And there was one that was the Arcturian saying that if you're ready, we'll come into your sphere, we'll come into your orbit. So I was getting ready for bed, and I was doing my little nightly routine, and I was praying, and I was saying, yeah, I'm ready. Like, yeah, let's do this. I want to experience that. And I got into bed, and I put my hand, I sleep on two pillows, and I kind of curled up in the fetal position, and I slipped my hand in between the two pillows, and a hand came through the wall. My bed is up against an outdoor wall. You know how somebody will slip you some skin, like in the
yes.
Not, yeah, and slip me some skin, and I jolted up, and I said out loud, "I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Please go away. It was terrifying." Anyway,
now, what's on the other side? What's on the other side of that wall?
Other apartment buildings, the back alley. Nothing. I mean,
okay,
just the usual.
All right. So you felt an alien hand meet your hand between your pillows as it came through to slip you some skin. Now, do you remember the sensation of the hand as it gave you a little bit of a low five and slid across your palm there? Was it cold and clammy? Was it warm like yours? Was it scaly? What do you have for me?
It was bigger than mine. It was warm, and it was not moist. It was
sticky.
It wasn't. it wasn't dry or scaly. It was as if you were going to, it was like anybody doing that, but it was just a bigger, heavier hand.
Okay, and you were totally sober. You did not go to the local dispensary that day and just, down, none of that.
No, I wasn't. I was actually quite prayerful, and I was sincere in my request, and I actually ran it by. I do love channeling. I love when people have that gift to be able to channel outer spirit beings, angels, and I was going on Wednesday evenings to a Zoom call that was channeling the angels. It was called the Angel Dialogues. And I asked if that was real, and it was. They said yes, but you weren't ready. You're not.
Well,
you think you're ready until it happens.
So Terry,
and then you're like, oh, hell.
Well, Terry, it looks like you were ready that night. Real quick, how long ago was this?
About a year.
About a year ago, and you have not tried it. You have not tried it yet. You've had your you've had your close encounter, and that was close enough.
You got the wrong girl. No, I ain't the one. No,
okay.
I'm not. That's too.
It was
too visceral. It literally made me jump up and say out loud. It was so immediate.
No, I get you.
Frank,
I get you, and there's one for the books right there. Thank you for the call, Terry.
My pleasure.
There you go. Terry from Los Angeles calls in, and she wanted a close encounter, and man, oh man, that's what I was expecting to happen to me when I was at the inn in Chester, Vermont. All right, when I was at the Haunted Inn in Chester, Vermont, I was totally expecting me to be laying there and somebody giving me dap. No, I don't know. Nothing happened. Thankfully, nothing happened. All right, let's take some more calls. 914-200-0219. 475, how are you? Who is this?
Hi, Frank. This is Laura from Connecticut.
Hey, Laura. How are you?
Hi. Good. I called in a few times a while ago. I also wanted to just call. I usually call about, like, vaccine information and stuff like that. We had, like, rallies here in Connecticut that I wanted to tell you about. But I also am calling because a friend of mine is part of whethepatriots.org. And they do a lot of work there, and they have, like, lawyers that work there, and all sorts of lawsuits going on. They're fighting, in Connecticut and a few other states. But they also did a movie, and the world premiere is tomorrow, so I just wanted to tell your listeners.
Okay, what's the movie about, real quick?
It's called Shot Dead, and it's free if you go to their website, and it's about it's about the parents that lost children to the COVID shot.
And what's the website, real quick? You can put the website out. You can share the website if you want. What is it?
Sure. It's called whethepatriotsusa.org.
Okay.
And it's like a free. I think they're just letting people go to their website to watch it for free because they really just want to get these people's stories out. And of course they're taking donations because it's some of the lawsuits are very expensive. But they're offering the movie for free, and it's tomorrow at the premiere.
Well, that's great.
So
thank you.
Yeah, it's called whethepatriotsusa.org.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Lori, and keep fighting a good fight in Connecticut. There's plenty of fight to be had there. Well, you're not too much off. Better off than I am over here. But thanks again for the call.
Well, we're from New York, and we got kicked out.
Oh, okay.
Well, religious exemption.
You know what? In Connecticut, and like I said before, in 2020 when we were going through all that, and Lauren was pregnant, and again, thanks for the call. Connecticut was the place that gave us options at the hospital that we could not get in New York. They gave us waivers. They respected informed consent a lot more. They did not. In a roundabout way, threaten to get CPS or something like that involved or threaten to or tell us that even reasonable requests from the hospital as related to certain shots and other protocols could end up getting me listed as belligerent. So, be that as it may, thank God for Connecticut in September of 2020, because that was a last-minute switch. Last-minute switch. Let's go to our Super Chats. And tomorrow we're going to take a lot more calls from people. I have a guest that's coming on with us in the first half, but the second half is going to be a lot more calls. I really want to soak you guys and gals up, because Friday night I'm not going to be live at night. I might do something, from the back porch during the day on Friday. And then Saturday, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe once I get back from Boston, I'll do something from Studio B just to say hello, if I'm not totally physically exhausted and wasted from not only the course, the obstacle course out there, but then the 6.5 hours of driving total, which isn't too bad, but it could be an exhausting day. Still, I want to stay in touch over the weekend. Car Guys New England says, hi, Frank. Great show as always. Have a blessed rest of your week, Jay. Thank you so much, Jay. Another Jay Brits, says, Frank, praying for still waters with your family and friends, hoping the weekend goes well. I always pray the same for you and everybody out there. I love to see the audience come back every night that we're live, and I always pray to see more audience. And little by little, we're getting introduced to all your friends, your family, and then, as fate may have it, some people just still stumble upon us. But the operations are about to get a little bit more intricate, and hopefully we can put some signal flares out into the greater internet and draw some new eyes in ways like we never were able to do. So thank you for sticking with me, and continue to stick with me. I promise we're going to continue to work our asses off. Katie Sky says they make Fruit Loops with Lucky Charm type marshmallows now. My gosh. That is literally just snacks. That's snacks. Okay, that is all right, that looks dangerous, and I'm going to keep that in the cabinet for a night that I'm really going to let my hair down and go hog wild. Because anybody who had that for breakfast is really starting their day off on the wrong foot. But it does sound intriguing. It does, I gotta say. All right, what else do we have? Anything else? 1, 2, 3, Zip-a-dee. Alan Wrench. Hold on, there's a couple more over here. Captain Flint, C. Blanche. Chai Possum says, thanks, Frank and Veles. Great show. And C. Blanche again, Godspeed all. Godspeed to you guys and gals at home. I'll see you tomorrow night, Thursday. It's been a wonderful time with you all. And until then, keep your pants off. Got no time for that. Oh, I screwed up again. I did not line up. There it is. Now it's lined up. All right, we'll be back tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. See you then.
Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
Quite Frankly's film of our live studio audience, and now our super chatters, Car Guys New England, Jay Brits, Katie Sky, Jay Brits again, to all of our wonderful friends over there on pill.net and quitefrankly.tv using that wonderful gold pill system. You guys, I'm releasing the scratching. I love you all, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good night. Get to quitefrankly.tv. Enjoy your hump day.